Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Clarice. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we end up kind of picking up the investigation. Obviously, the squad's together discussing like what their next move is going to be. Obviously, they end up looking into Ty's situation, and it turns out Ty is actually his father is the CEO of a pharmaceutical company, the same pharmaceutical company that was it Refrisol, the drug that's been causing the birth defects, the one that's been at the center of this conspiracy and all these murders and cover-ups. So obviously it's kind of on Clarice to kind of push him, but when she ends up talking to him, there ends up being like this sympathy, whether it's because of her, maybe when she looks at him, she sees her brother, like obviously, like I think she finds like someone who's kind of is a little bit of a kindred spirit. Once again, that person you feel like you can just lean on, like lean all your troubles on. Because he ends up talking about the fact is his dad, he didn't find out who his dad was till 14. He was kind of like the bastard child. He was like, I was overlooked. I kind of treated it as like a bastard child type of thing. And maybe it's just kind of a thing of like, oh, it happened and I wasn't aware. Like, obviously for him, it's like, me and my mom were poor, but at the very least, you know, I had something. I had her. Like, I had all I needed until she got sick and died. And then all of a sudden, his dad happens to pop up soon afterwards. It's like, oh, he just happens to pop up in my life. You know, apparently had been looking for me. I guess he needed a successor. Maybe it played into the story of him having like, this son I brought up into the fold and stuff like that. I don't know whether he tried to use that narrative of like, oh yeah, here's a son I never knew about, or here's this son, making him like your golden child to kind of boost your own situation. Who knows why he did what he did, reaching out. I guess because maybe it's like he couldn't have like a quote unquote bastard child of his out there that could potentially come and take everything he has later on. So let me come find you first, bring you into the fold. This way I kind of control you a little bit more, especially for someone who went their entire life never knowing who their dad was at that point in time. And it's like, we'll do anything, especially at that time when he had nothing and no one. His dad kind of gave him someone and everything. So because of that, he doesn't want to help out Clarice because it's like, this is my dad and I don't want to do anything that kind of would basically threaten that. You know, it's like he kind of picked me up when I had no one, so I don't want to kind of destroy that relationship. And that's an angle to this episode I think is so fascinating. It's about like, obviously cops kind of pushing certain things. So like Clark, we see him pushing Naomi, and even later on telling Clarice to kind of push on the more Julia Lawson angle. That ended up being a really interesting storyline because I didn't expect things to kind of play out the way they did. Like, but really quickly, let's talk about that. Like, the moment, like, they got introduced to Julia and it's like, oh, who's this? Oh, it's Erin, my roommate. The moment she said that, you saw Erin's look, I was like, you guys are in a relationship. It's like, right. And it was like, being gay at this time, probably not, had to do a lot of explaining and probably has to deal with certain looks from people's. But then, like, all of a sudden, like, the moment it's like, oh, wait, you're Clarice Starling? Yeah, could you leave? Or do we need to get lawyers? And I was like, whoa. That changed super quick the moment that they found out about her being Clarice. I was like, why is that such an issue? And then so her and Erin are talking later on. It's like, Julia wants to do the right thing because it's like, I mean, she hadn't really decided, but Erin was like, you kind of have made up your mind because you want to do the right thing. There were 3 women that were killed. And it's like, am I supposed to just ignore that? But Erin's like, you do this, you could end up losing your job. And the fact of the matter is, I'm sick. This pays for the life that we have. And obviously, like, her, like, treatments and stuff. But then she gets into that aspect of, well, when you go see Clarice, tell her what she did to you. I was like, in that moment, I was like, Buffalo Bill. Like, I didn't need the next scene, the following scene or whatever to tell me. I was like, that conversation told me everything. Buffalo Bill. And I thought that was so interesting because it's like, right, in this particular time in the 90s, someone labeled as a transsexual serial killer, like, kind of like, oh, disturbed and transsexual desires led to his murder spree, him being the serial killer. Of course, it's going to have ramifications. Like, that's going to be the issue with any group. Like, if there's like a black serial killer, it's going to look frowned upon, especially in older times. It was going to frown upon, you know, anyone of that group because they'd be looked at a certain way. And we see that, you know, she opens up to Clarice later on and says, like, basically, you made my life hard because it's like all these things would be like murderer monster, and it'll be right next to the word transsexual. You made my life hard. I always have to hide a part of who I am because I can never admit who I am because I'd lose my job. Not only that, I would lose my life because everyone would turn on me knowing that. And for Clarice, it's like all those headlines and stuff, like I didn't say anything. That was on them, but it's like, yeah, but your silence. I was like, that's a powerful thing. Obviously fits with the theme, silence, the silence of the lambs and stuff like that. But it's interesting because like, obviously, like, silence kind of plays a big part in Clarice's life, obviously, to the extent of, like, her background, her family's not something she really talks about, and, like, obviously, like, what that kind of did to her, psychologically and stuff like that. But also learning, like, right, like, she didn't like the whole being heralded as a hero. It was like, I'm just doing my job. I just wanted to save someone. She wasn't doing it for glory. And now realizing, like, oh, you've been put on this pedestal, which she didn't like, but now realizing me being put on this pedestal caused so many people so much pain that it's not just Julia, it's anyone like her going through that. And I thought that was such a fascinating development because, of course, like I said, Buffalo Bill being who Buffalo Bill was, of course that would have ramification against the group he associated himself with, It's not, they were like, yeah, he was a monster. His circumstances are his. It shouldn't be, like, branded against the transsexual community as a whole, but it was, And her silence, because that's the thing, silence speaks volumes, because it's like, by not saying anything, you had a voice. I don't. Like, if I come out, like, and it's just my voice is going to be buried and I'm just going to get hate. You are in a powerful position. You had a voice and you said nothing. And it's like, for Clarice, it's like, well, what, like, it doesn't come up because I think for Clarice, it's like, what can I do? Like, the damage has been done. Like, no matter what I say now, it can't get rid of the stigma I help perpetuate by being silent, So it's like, you feel bad for, that wasn't her intention, but, it's like, whether it was her intention or not, this is where we are right now. This is the world we live in, so I thought that was kind of, I thought that was a really interesting development to the story to make it kind of like, right, like, that being kind of the aftermath of the Buffalo Bill thing. At the same time, you also have Credler. He had went to Joe Hudlin about the divorce and everything, like, still pretending like, yeah, you got a hold on me. And obviously, he's trying to screw over Mandy, but obviously Paul doesn't want to do that. But it's like, think of her as dead, because technically the woman you loved is dead. It's just been replaced by a heartless bitch who's trying to take your children from you. And it's like, obviously Paul's just kind of going with the flow, and it's like, well, he brings up Carolina, and it's like, it's like, yeah, it was brought to my desk by a U.S. Assistant U.S. attorney, and it's like, so trying to play like, oh, I'm not looking into it, but it was brought to my desk, and it's like, oh, I'm trying to keep us copacetic, so why don't you pour me a drink? It's like, oh, Paul, you're supposed to be playing. He's like, come on, are you going to tell anybody? So playing like, oh, like he's skewing that line, like saying like, oh, like I can play ball when the time comes, like that I am corruptible even though I'm not. But it turns out the pharmaceutical company that what was it, like, it's like something with like AL at the beginning. Essentially Tyson's dad's company is going through a buyout right now, so they're trying to clear up, like, because Joe is their fixer. He's like their go-to fixer lawyer, and so basically he's clearing up any like trails that could go back. So all the people that, like, from the clinical trials that could tie back, because it's like, yeah, they've known for years what this drug could potentially do, yet they still push it, because Naomi talks about the fact that she gets paid a bonus for like overshooting the quota when she's recommending the drug to like doctors to prescribe to their patients. So like she's living a good life and everything, maybe not knowing, maybe not caring about the ramifications of it, and obviously, you have Clark kind of pushing her on that to be like, oh, like, your Australian boyfriend, he might get sent back to Australia if you don't help me out, so help me help you. And he's being like, oh, I don't want to do this either. It's like, but the fact is, I don't know, it's hard to say, because it seems like you lean into it a little too much, but it's also like, for him, it's like, it's a part of my job, it's like, it's what that, we do to get what we need, and it's like, that's an uncomfortable aspect to it that Clarice isn't too happy about, because later on, when it all comes out about Julia, because he ended up finding out, I was like, yeah, I got something that you could press her on, and it's like, she's a trans, and it was like, stop right there, we're not going to do this, and he was like, why? Because you don't want to do, and it's like, you're just doing this because you just got a woman killed because sadly Naomi ended up dying. She paged him a 911, and the moment he showed up, she overdosed on the, like she died from the Reprisol. But it's like, yeah, there's no way she's going to hit you with a 911 and then immediately kill herself afterwards. So much like, them covering bases, trying to make things seem like, oh, first a serial killer killed those 3 women, and that the reporter Rebecca was going to kill herself. So they obviously set the stage before, so this wouldn't be the first time. But it also speaks volume. To be fair, Joe's probably got eyes and ears everywhere. I mean, he's also like working for a very powerful man who probably has a lot of reach too. But it's like, how did he know that they were investigating? They kept this super hush hush, but I guess like word eventually got out because she got removed from, and it's like, right, so Hudlin now knows we're investigating, so he's clearing house yet again. And obviously he runs into Julia at work, and he's like, oh, no, you do good work. And he's like, yeah, good night, see you, or like, good work, Gordon. And then Julia's like, wait, what'd you just say? She's like, I said, great work, Julia, see you around. And it's like, he knows Julia's circumstances, and it's like he's going to use it, as he's done time and time again, to blackmail people. And it's like, well, for him, it's like, I won't even have to kill you. I'll expose you to the world, and the world will kill you for me, type of thing. I think that could be it. Or maybe it could just be, I'll keep your secret if you shut your mouth and stop feeding information to anyone else. It's like, once again, how is he finding out who's connected to all this? I don't know. Like, even with the powers and resources, it just seems so crazy that he's able to jump on that immediately, kind of get rid of Naomi, jump on Julia, and, know everything there is to know about her. I mean, to be fair, Murray ended up finding all that stuff out about her, so I guess, with the right, power and connections, you can do anything, but still. So, which, speaking of Murray, we do see, I guess his whole relationship with Krendler is like, Paul, it's like a no bullshit relationship. It's like, basically, it's like, before all that BS comes out your mouth, you could have found another way to kind of hook Joe in. You drunk because you wanted to drink. So basically, it's just saying, like, it's a slippery slope, better, like, kind of keeping an eye on him. It's like, you don't have to watch me, like, he references like a dog or something, and then Clark's like, wolf, and it's just like, so he's trying to keep an eye on his good friend and stuff like that, so he doesn't kind of go spiraling, because obviously he is an alcoholic, and this could just be the jumping off point in many different regards. So there's all of that. There's an interesting angle between Clarice and Esquivel this episode I thought was kind of fascinating, where they end up talking, and obviously, like, she's bouncing back and forth between the investigation and his relationship with the medical examiner. Obviously, it's like, there was this awkward moment where she was like, yeah, where I'm from, that means you're married. And he was like, we can talk about this, but, like, I can't go. I was like, what, like, why did conversation get awkward? Like, was it him being like, afraid to keep talking about it? Like, he was saying like he could talk about it, but he didn't want, like, I didn't understand that part. I don't know whether he was referencing Clarice kind of dive into her dark past, like, I can't go there, or what was he referencing? Do let me know in the comments down below. I feel like I just misinterpreted that aspect of the scene. But it turns out the medical examiner in particular, she was a part of, they referenced something in somewhere in Texas. It was like a terrible thing where, like, 25 people died, 27 got injured. I'm not well versed in a lot of, like, I'm not a crime buff, so I don't know the incident they were referencing. It must have been a pretty big incident in the 90s that they're referencing, because obviously, like, early on in the show, they referenced Waco being like, yeah, like, episode 2 was like, yeah, we're here to make sure another Waco doesn't happen. Tangents and all that side, but it was like, she was a part of that, and she kind of wakes up crying every night, because it's like, right, like, the type of monsters who can do something like that, and it turns out, like, Clarice kind of figures it out. It's like, wait, she doesn't know that you were a sniper. And he was like, were? Like, Murray still calls me killer. Krendler calls me his sniper boy. Like, for regardless of, that's what my job was. And he even talked about in the past, like, for him, he actually kind of misses those days because it was simpler. It's like, you had a target, you had orders to follow. It was just kind of like, you were just kind of like the person holding the gun, and it's like, when you got the order, you pulled the trigger. It was like, it was simpler. It was easier back then, like, in his own complicated way. And so for him, he still feels that. It's like, regardless of me, like, no longer being in the military, me being an FBI agent, that's still a part of who I am, because it's always going to be a part of my identity, because, like, the way they talk about me, it's like, yeah, that's what comes first and foremost. So, But Clarice is telling him to kind of open up more. Like, you can't build a relationship if you're holding yourself back, which even he says something interesting to Clarice of like, is there anyone that knows all of you? And so she kind of is quiet about that because I don't think there is. Like, she doesn't show all sides to everyone. There's a lot of stuff she keeps to herself. I think we all do that. There's a lot we all keep to ourselves. Once again, like the personas, the mask that we show to certain people and not to others. Like, we never pull down all our masks to show people who we really are, on a daily basis, I think, I definitely know in my particular case I don't. So it's just kind of interesting. It's like, he's wondering, like, well, how will I do it? She's like, oh, you're a smart guy, kind of saying, like, you'll figure it out. The right way to kind of approach everything. But also, Clarice goes and confronts Tyson about, like, I get it, like, she's like, I lost my dad when I was young. And she's like, I get it, like, I'm supposed to push you, but she's like, I don't need to because I do already know what you love and what's kind of most important to you, and that's your relationship with your dad. Because it's like that, we both want the same thing. We both want to know who your dad is because you've been coloring the lines little by little trying to figure out who your dad is, and you really want to know. And like, together, like, I need your help to kind of expose him for being like connected to some very, very bad people, because you yourself have always wanted to know who your dad is and you don't really know. And so obviously it could be a situation where Tyson's dad might feel like, well, you were always kind of the bastard child. I brought you in for my specific reasons. Like I said, I brought up earlier my thoughts about it. Whether that ends up being the case or not, we'll see. But it's like, I brought you in here of my volition, and you want to turn your back on me, then I'll get rid of you. So I'm curious to see if that ends up being a thing where, like, potentially he will kill Tyson. I mean, if he does, like, what does that mean for Clarice? Because it's like, just like how Clark's reacting to, like, oh, I pushed Naomi to this and now she's dead. How would Clarice feel? Especially because she formed, like, a complicated bond and connection with Tyson. So, I mean, in a way, that seems like that might be what's benefiting this situation. Because for him, even he admits, like, yeah, talking to you is actually easy, compared to most things. So I think it's just a lot really fascinating. So there's that angle of things. There's also the Black Coalition. Obviously, Garrett and Ardelia are working on that. Obviously, they're coming up with these different complaints over the years, and it is that complicated thing of, like, yeah, this one particular agent had, like, someone, like, some officers, like, put, like, a monkey or a chimp or something, like, face on his 8-year-old son's face, and Garrett's like, I would have walked out of there. But it's like, Ardea kind of goes in the look, yeah, but we know why he didn't. The fact is, struggling and stuff like that, taking care of a child, like, you need that money, so you kind of put up with it, And to be fair, that's kind of, they have all that they need to kind of make a case. So they go to the lawyer, who he talks about the fact is that they didn't win theirs, like, and they ended up leaving kind of the FBI because the FBI wasn't what they thought it was. Like, they had their vision of what the FBI was going to be and their part to play in it, and it turns out, like, that's not what this FBI is. So. But obviously he's willing to take their case. Hearing Ardelia's story about, like, it's like, oh, I thought Clarice solved the case. It was like, no, we worked that together. My DNA research led us to catching the bad guy. I solved that cold case. And now my boss is some freckled white dude who doesn't even know anything. I had to be the one to teach him, even though this is my project. They wouldn't give me the position and everything. It's like, so we'll let this be the focal point of it, but we're going to need a fall guy to be, like, the focal point of it, and that's going to be Clarice, which Ardelia feels conflicted about because, like, this is her friend. Like, I can't throw my friend under the bus. It's like, Garrett's like, you're already under the bus. You're just dragging her with you. Like, if she's a real friend, she'd understand. It is just the thing of, like, it's sad that Clarice kind of has to be the sacrificial lamb in this particular case, but Ardelia does bring it up to Clarice later on, and I think her run-in with Julia kind of, like, I think she already probably felt like this, but I think probably because she even says it, like, she's learning today, like, her actions have led to a lot of people getting hurt, Now Ardelia's suffering the ramifications because of the Phelps case of, like, right, because of me, she got overshadowed, and they used that as an excuse. It's like, no, it's not you, it's the Bureau's fault, but, like, your fame and everything kind of took some opportunities away from me, and it's like, me being the focal point of this case is important to so many people. Like, this can open up the door for so many people, in our lawsuit against the FBI. So it's like, Clarice is kind of understanding, and she's like, it's like, you don't have to thank me because I'm basically going to end up ruining your life. But I think Clarice kind of like feeling like her fame and everything, she never wanted it. And even Ardelia Riddle, it's like, yeah, Clarice never asked for any of this. It's like, yeah, even Clarice being like, yeah, we should be on the same rise. You are a great agent, just as much of a great agent as I am. Like, we should have the same equal opportunities, but me being white has led to you not having the opportunities that you should. So I think there's a part of Clarice that kind of, there is a little bit of that masochistic thing of like, I think she will feel better about her being torn down, because I think that's her way of kind of punishing herself because of what Ardelia is going through, what Julia is going through, many people have gone through because of her, you know, and her fame and everything, her being the FBI's poster child. I think this is Clarice's way to kind of punish herself to a certain extent. Plus, I think, you know, what kind of effect that's going to have on future cases, because her name being run through the mud will probably make it so it's like, yeah, we can't have you out there investigating because you're going to look, it's going to cause some issues for the FBI. So you can no longer be a poster child, so that means we can't have you out there. I'm curious how Ruth is going to handle that as well. We'll see. So there's that element to it. There's also Catherine's side of things where she gets a call from Ned and she's super excited. He wants to meet up, so she actually makes it outside. This is the furthest she's ever made it, because they show it in the preview, like Ruth being like, I'd actually be worried if she could actually make it down the elevator. And it turns out she did, but she couldn't make it too far. She hasn't left the house in a year. It just, all of it is overstimulating the real world. Like, she's only known the walls of that house for so long, and B, the nanny comes and kind of pulls her back in, but it's like, she's like, I just want it to go, like, feel normal again. It's like, it's okay. It's like, you took the first steps. Like, that in itself is leaps and bounds. You'll get there. But for her, it's like, I want to meet with Ned, because hearing his voice again, it made me feel normal. Like, it felt like things could go back to the way they were. But B says, yes, before he abandoned you. So it's like, after everything went down with Buffalo Bill, he, probably along with other people, like, who knows, probably like other friends or whatever, probably kept their distance, just because it's like, well, what can we do? You know, how can we comfort someone after? And there's no easy answer, but you know, just being there. You don't have to say anything. Sometimes just listening to people is all they need. They just need someone to vent to, listen. You don't even have to say anything. Sometimes it's more important that you don't say anything. And so, but, you know, for Catherine, it's like, regardless of that, I want to meet with Ned. And so she goes to a restaurant to meet with him, and it's like, it's fun and it's nice, and they're kind of hitting it off again. You know, he's apologetic because he's like, yeah, I didn't know how to help you. And even Catherine being like, yeah, like, it's a very complicated circumstance. Like, there was no one's ever really been in a circumstance like that. So I can understand you not really knowing how to help there or be there for me, you know? But then it turns out, because the way he's like tapping and everything, I was like, what are you so nervous about? What is that about? And it's like, and then it's like, oh, I think you've got the wrong impression. I'm like, you're dating someone, you piece of... And it's like, yeah, that's what this was about. He's like, yeah, I just felt like I just wanted, you know... And she's like, oh, you just want to cut ties with me. He's like, no. I just want to make sure you're okay before... It's like, oh, you wanted my forgiveness. Really? Which is effed up. It's like, you abandoned me when I needed you most. And now you're here because you're about to date someone, and to clear your own conscience, you're here wanting my forgiveness, you know? And she kind of tears into him. You kind of feel a little bit bad, but then there's also the thing for her, it's like, right, the fact is, I saw you for who you are. Basically saying, you're not a man, you're weak. I saw you as always someone that I would have to carry. Like, I accepted that. You know, the way you basically touched me when we were in bed, when we were at that thing or whatever, and I gave you my coat, and he's like, you said I could, and she was like, yes, that's what I said. But the fact of the matter is, you're not a man. Like, you know, you're scared that the woman you're trying to date right now is going to find out the truth that you know, the truth that I already saw, that you're not a man at all. And it's like, yo, she tore him down. I don't know whether that was kind of the right thing to do. Like, I mean, considering her circumstances, like, who am I to judge, like, how she reacts to learning, like, oh, I'm just kind of a means to an end. You made it seem like, oh, you know, we could be together again. Like, you're trying to make amends, but you're only trying to make amends to make yourself feel better, so that when you cut me loose and move on, that it's not too bad, you know? So, luckily her mom showed up to kind of pull her back from, like, everything, so... But later on, she calls Clarice and it's like, oh my God, like, I went outside, went to a restaurant. It's like, yeah, like, I took some steps forward. And it's like, you know, she's thanking Clarice and everything. So, but then I was like, what is she doing? At first, I was like, is she killing Precious or something? But it's like, no, she's looking into Buffalo Bill's mom, and she's got that look in her eye. Because the thing is, she just wants to talk to her. She claims that, but who knows what that situation could turn into with those nightmares like popping up again, like. Obviously, even in a restaurant, she's looking up, and just all the noise made her, and she can go back to hearing Buffalo Bill screaming, and also just like her being at the bottom of that well. She was back there again, despite everything. And so she can now leave, and now she's making a point that she's going to confront Buffalo Bill. Like, whether Buffalo Bill's mom, whether that will. She thinks maybe it'll fix something. Maybe it'll get her to be able to, find some way back to normal. Whether it is just confronting her, but I don't think it's going to go simply that way. I think she might not end up killing her, but she might be tiptoeing towards that. And I think that's going to be a sad thing, because I'm sure Clarice is going to feel like this is another person I've hurt, because once again, silence speaks volumes. And it also, like, by not saying anything, it's like, right, I kind of hurt Julia and every person part of her community, and I kind of hurt Catherine not really being there for her. And even when I have, like, not really knowing how to help, it's a complicated. I don't think there is an easy solution for what Clarice or Catherine's going through. It's a very unique circumstance, so presents a lot of interesting things. I'm curious to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.